Hello and welcome to Homemaking with Joy. I'm Rachel and we're so glad you decided to join us for week 1 of the Pantry Challenge. This is a review of all the meals we've made in the first week of the challenge. We're so excited to share them with you and we hope you enjoy it.
We are starting off the week with some basic eggs and toast, and this is how I like to prepare them. These are eggs from our backyard chickens, and I'm super grateful that they are still laying. They actually laid all last winter, and they're still laying now in January this year, and I don't know why, but I'm a big fan. We didn't put a light in the coop or anything to affect their laying cycle. This is just how they happen to be doing it, and we are taking advantage. My family eats between 6 and 8 eggs for a breakfast, so I think I got 6 this morning. I really dislike having leftover eggs because they don't reheat very well. I'd rather run out and supplement the breakfast with something else. So here are my 6 eggs. I like to put it in a mason jar because I think it's easier to whisk. You'll see me here using a fork. I also don't use a whisk because that's harder to clean. I like to use a fork to fluff them, get some air in them, and it's really easy to do it in the mason jar because I know it's not going to spill. Plus, I have lots of those laying around my kitchen. Sometimes I'll add a bit of water or milk to fluff them up, but I didn't do that today. I do almost all of my cooking in cast iron, and eggs are no exception. So here you see me using a tablespoon of butter to really grease my pan so the eggs do not stick. It's very frustrating to clean scrambled eggs off the entire bottom of your cast iron skillet. When I pour the eggs in, I like to do it in a circular motion. I think it helps it not stick so much. I want the eggs to come in contact with the butter and not just pour it in the center and push all the butter out of the way. So I don't know if this actually works the way I think it does, but it works for me. So maybe give it a try. We had some leftover dinner rolls from our family gatherings this last weekend. So instead of using my homemade toast, we are just using up these rolls. And that roll is too wide to fit in my toaster, so I'm trimming it down a bit. And my family did not mind because it's just more surface area to put jam on later. Hopping back over to my eggs, I like to preheat my skillet to about medium heat so it gets quite hot when I first add those eggs, and I let it sit until they solidify a bit. And then I'll just move the eggs out of the way a little bit. The runny eggs will run onto the hot skillet and keep cooking from there. Once I have a pretty good base layer and you can see it's not really sticking, I'll turn the temperature down so I don't burn them, but I have found that works well for me. I did get a little sticking on the side, but it came off pretty easily with my utensil, and so I'd call that a success. From here, I'm just going to break up the eggs because my kids prefer smaller pieces to eat with their toast, but the eggs are pretty much done. Now I will assemble plates back in the kitchen and take them over to the table. I find it's easier if I put things together for the kids. This is their breakfast for the morning. I did add some salt and pepper to the eggs at some point too, but I didn't film that. After the eggs and toast, the kids were still hungry, so they decided to get some fruit out of the basement. They got a jar of peaches and a jar of applesauce, and I would say about 80% of them were consumed. My eldest son really likes taking the lids off of jars. It makes him feel big, and I think it's super sweet. It is now time for lunch, and I have a house full of hangry children, so I'm working as quickly as I can to put together some Instant Pot Hamburger Helper. I'm not going to be extremely thorough in the explanation of this dish because I do have a whole video dedicated to this recipe. It is a staple in our house, and if you've never made it before, I highly recommend you give it a try. I started by dicing half an onion and I turned my Instant Pot on saute mode. I added a little bit of oil in the bottom and then the onion just to let it soften a bit before adding the meat. The original recipe calls for a pound of ground beef, but I have lots of ground venison and you cannot taste a difference in this dish, so I decided to use venison. Unfortunately, it was still a little bit frozen, but it ended up working out just fine. I had one kiddo who really wanted to help with the job, so while the venison was thawing and cooking in the Instant Pot, we decided to shred the cheese. I will forever cherish these videos of my little helpers in the kitchen because I know they don't stay little for long. At this point in the recipe, the venison is completely cooked, so I'm adding a little bit of garlic. You don't want to add it at the beginning because it will burn. I'm going to mix that in there and then add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, or as some people on the internet like to call it, wash your sister sauce, because you can't get mad if you intentionally say it wrong. So here is some wash your sister sauce. The next ingredient is some broth. The original recipe calls for beef broth, but I had some homemade chicken broth in the fridge that I didn't want to go bad, so I decided to use chicken broth instead. I hope that the pantry challenge and just watching cooking videos online in general can help you see how flexible this can be. You don't have to stick 100% to the recipe, just stick to the essence of it, and generally everything turns out just fine. I give that a stir and make sure nothing is stuck on the bottom, and then add my pasta. This is 1 pound of macaroni. I buy 2 pound boxes, so I had to measure out a pound ahead of time, which is why it's in a Tupperware container and not out of the box. I flatten that out to make sure all the noodles are touching the liquid so they all cook evenly, and then it's time to pop on my lid and get it cooking. But before we get any further into this recipe, here is a funny story that I'd like to tell you. The official name of this recipe is Instant Pot Hamburger Helper, as I said, but my kids lovingly call it Nana Noodles. And the story goes like this. I made this recipe for the kids and they really liked it. So one day my mom was watching them and she made it for them. Well, apparently Nana's version tasted better than my version, even though I gave Nana the recipe. So to this day, we continue to call them Nana Noodles as a sweet reminder of the woman who loves me and my children so much and apparently makes food better because she's a Nana. To finish this recipe, I am just adding in all the shredded cheese. I like to add it in little by little so it melts evenly and looks like this. Then I put it in bowls and take it to my hungry children, and my 2 big boys ate 3 helpings each. It is a hit at our house and you have to give it a try. It's time to prep dinner. Tonight's menu includes meatloaf, potatoes, and corn. So I have the other half of the onion that I used at lunchtime, and I'm going to dice it finely and just throw all my meatloaf ingredients in that big bowl, mix it up, and call it a day. Meatloaf is not complicated, it's quite simple, and it's really good. So I don't mind making it on a regular basis. The only struggle is that of all the meat that I get from our beef, I run out of ground beef first. I think it's the most versatile meat, and that's another reason I used venison during lunch today. So watching my ground beef numbers is something I'll really have to do on the pantry challenge, because often it's what I reach for first. I stumbled across this recipe when I was looking for a 1 pound meatloaf. Back when it was just my husband and me, we didn't need a whole 2 pounds of meatloaf, and I didn't grow up eating meatloaf, so I didn't have a recipe that got passed down to me. This has become our family favorite. It's called cheeseburger meatloaf because of the addition of the cheese, and I think cheese makes everything better. The original recipe calls for chunks of cheese, like you take a block and you cut it up, but I had this shredded cheese that needed used, so that's what I put in. The original recipe also calls for breadcrumbs, but I didn't have any convenient. I could have made some, but that's not convenient. It's much easier to just grab the quick oats out of the pantry and throw those in instead. The oats are just used as a binder to hold everything together, and it does the same function as the breadcrumbs. I will be sure to link this recipe and any other recipes that I can share down below in the description box. Now it is time to add the beef. Like I said, throw everything in one container and then just mix it all up with my hands. I know that grosses some people out, but I really think it's the most efficient way to do it, and you just gotta get the job done. Plus, I can wash my hands, you know? Unfortunately, my beef was still slightly frozen in the middle, so I'm having a little bit of a hard time here breaking up parts of the beef, but with a little bit of massaging, a little bit of mixing, it turned out just fine. So I'm just going to mix this until it's thoroughly combined and get it into my pan for baking. Now, traditionally, you put meatloaf in a loaf pan, but I saw this idea online somewhere and I really, really like it. I put my 2 pound meatloaf in my cast iron skillet. I like how it bakes, I like how it slices, I like how it doesn't cook over with all the juices and whatnot. It just kind of shrinks into the middle and it doesn't make a huge mess. Plus, I don't mind cleaning my cast iron skillet, and so it just works out well for me. So I'm just going to flatten all of my meat mixture in here, get it as flat as I can before I add the glaze on top, and then throw it in the oven. The glaze includes ketchup, brown sugar, yellow mustard, and Worcestershire sauce, or wash your sister sauce, as some people enjoy saying. It's very simple. Here, I only made a single batch. I forgot to double it. So after I filmed this, I threw some more ketchup and other ingredients in there, and that made enough glaze for on top. My family doesn't love the topping, and so I usually keep it pretty light on the topping, but if your family really likes it, feel free to add more. While meatloaf can be a little challenging because it takes a while in the oven, it is nice that you can work ahead. You could make this at any point during the day, stash it in the fridge, and then it would be ready for supper time. So this is one of those meals that maybe takes a little bit of effort, but it does really help you work ahead. Along with our meatloaf, I will be serving some freezer corn. This is corn that we bought and preserved over the summer. I'm also going to roast some spaghetti squash at the same time. My husband's grandma had these from her garden and they were starting to go bad, so she gave me a couple to use. I will likely be the only person who eats the spaghetti squash, so I'm also getting some potatoes on a sheet pan. These are potatoes that I grew in my garden this year, and I didn't have a great way to store them, so I cut them, parboiled them, and froze them like this so they would be super convenient this winter. And let me tell you, it's awesome. So I just threw them on this pan with a little bit of tallow, and I'll put them in the oven to roast with everything else. I feel very efficient using all of my oven space. This is our meal: the corn, the meatloaf, the potatoes, and the spaghetti squash. Everyone filled their bellies this evening, and we had lots of leftovers for future meals. Your food doesn't have to be complicated. Simple meals fill bellies. Good morning. It is January 6th, and I am getting food ready for breakfast. Today I am making puff pancake for the family, also known as a German pancake or a Dutch baby or Dutch pancake. I don't know, it has lots of names, but this is what it looks like. It's basically one big pancake, mostly made of eggs, and so I feel really good about giving it to the kids. It's high protein, it's also super simple and really, really delicious. So this is how you make it. I prepared all of my ingredients. I milled my soft white wheat, I measured my milk, and now I'm adding my 5 eggs to a blender. All of the ingredients, except the butter, which you'll see later, gets added to the blender and mixed here. You can mix it in a bowl, but I think using a blender works better because you can ensure there are no lumps from the flour and you whip some air into it, which helps make a fluffier end product. I also like that I can whip this up in the blender and then it bakes in the oven for a little while. So if you have other things you need to get done in the morning, this is a great make ahead breakfast. Or I think of the homesteading or farm families that need breakfast cooking in the oven while they do chores. This would be a great option for you. I also really like the nutrition of this breakfast. It tastes like a pancake, but it packs a punch. You get great protein from the eggs and the milk. You get healthy fats from the butter, which will come a little bit later. You get carbs from the freshly milled whole grains, and you get some minerals in the maple syrup, which you will probably use to top your puff pancake. Anyway, I think it's a great option. It tastes really good. It fills up my kids, and it's simple. So, what more could you ask for? My cast iron skillet has been preheating in a 450-degree oven while I've been preparing the other ingredients. And this is where you add the butter. You put a half a stick of butter in your very hot pan, and please be careful because the butter can splatter when it comes in contact with that hot pan. I'll move it around just enough to melt all of it and coat the inside of my skillet. This butter will get absorbed into the puff pancake, but it does also help it not stick to the bottom of your cast iron skillet. I give my blender one more blitz to make sure everything is mixed together because the flour can settle at the bottom while it's sitting. And then I pour it into the hot cast iron skillet. Again, I like to go in a circle to help prevent it from sticking, but it's already starting to bake on the bottom of the skillet. I very, very carefully put it into the oven and let it bake for about 20 minutes. And this is why it's called a puff pancake. It puffs and rises in the oven, and my kids really enjoy watching it through the window. But please make sure you push it to the back of the stove so little people don't get burned. We like to top ours with maple syrup, and oftentimes I make two because the kids devour it. Lunch is just leftovers. I have no idea why this video turned out blurry, so sorry about that, but I just pulled everything out of the fridge that still needed eaten, and so everybody filled a plate and got some lunch. We had to run some errands this evening, so my husband treated us to a Chick-fil-A supper. This is my go-to order. What's your favorite thing at Chick-fil-A? The next morning, I served puff pancake again because we had 3 leftover pieces, which is perfect, one for each kid. And I also served it with some mandarin oranges because, as you know, sickness is going around, and hopefully that vitamin C boost will be enough to protect them from getting any of that stuff. I didn't have enough puff pancake to serve my husband, so I scrambled some eggs for him. Like last time, I put some butter in the bottom of my skillet, got it plenty hot, and poured in my scrambled eggs. It is always satisfying to see these eggs not stick in my skillet, and I'm very proud of myself for learning how to use the cast iron skillet. Again, I didn't grow up using one, so I had to learn by trial and error. This is what I'm serving the kids, and they were very happy with it 2 mornings in a row. It is still morning, but I am putting dinner in the slow cooker. I am putting in 2 venison roasts. Usually I do this with beef, but again, I have plenty of venison on hand at the moment, so I'm going to try this with venison. Nothing like trying something for the first time for the whole internet to see. So I added the roasts. I add a little bit of water because venison is leaner than beef. So beef usually cooks and has plenty of juices, but I wanted to make sure the venison didn't burn. And this is some of my home canned barbecue sauce that you may have seen in my pantry tour. This is the recipe from More Than Farmers, and I always top my jars with these awesome plastic lids afterward, and I'm very grateful to the family member who introduced me to them. This meal doesn't really have a recipe. You just put the meat in the crock pot, you put some sauce on top, and set it low and slow. It'll cook all day and it should shred apart this evening, and I'll top it with more barbecue sauce. Today's lunch is finishing up the Instant Pot Hamburger Helper and some strawberries. Nice and simple. I decided to serve my shredded venison on some rolls tonight. So I am making I guess they're called hamburger rolls, but I'm going to put shredded meat in them. I do have a video on my channel with more in-depth instructions on how to make this recipe. But first, as always, I have to mill my wheat. The recipe originally comes from Jill Winger. She used all-purpose flour, but I adapted it to freshly milled flour so we get those health benefits, and I really like the flavor. So I'm just adding all the ingredients into my mixer here, and then I will knead it. It's quite simple. It takes a little time, but simple. Like most bread recipes, I don't know exactly how much flour I will need to make these rolls the correct consistency. I think the recipe says 3 to 3.5 cups of flour, so I milled about 3 cups of freshly milled hard white wheat, and I'm going to mix that in and let it sit a little while to absorb the liquid. Freshly milled flour takes longer to absorb the liquids and the fats and everything, much longer than all-purpose flour. So I let it sit for probably 5 minutes. I don't want it to sit too long because then the yeast will start to rise the dough. But now I'm just going to add a little bit of all-purpose flour until I see it's the correct consistency and it's pooling away from the sides of the bowl. Some people who mill their own flour vow to never have all-purpose flour again in their kitchen. I'm not one of those people. I think there's a time and a place for it. There are some recipes that I haven't adapted to freshly milled flour yet, or I haven't found a great recipe. Other times, I just need a little flour to dust my countertop and it's not worth getting my mill out. And in some recipes, it is really nice to do part all purpose and part freshly milled because you can keep the texture that you had with all purpose, but you do add the nutrition of the freshly milled. So I think there's a time and a place for it. And right now I added just enough flour to get that off the side of the bowl. And now I will continue to knead it. And believe me, it makes a delicious, fluffy end product that I know is still good for my family. After it is done kneading and has passed the window pane test, I put it in my bowl like this to rise. My bowl has a lid, so I just leave it in there to rise instead of making another dirty dish. After about an hour and a half, this is what it looks like, all puffy and ready to be sectioned to make the rolls. This recipe says that it makes 8 rolls. I have made 10 or 12 rolls from it too. It just depends on how big you want them. With little kids, I prefer to do smaller rolls so they can actually eat what's given to them. I completely meant to do 10 rolls, but goofed on my counting. There's a lot of pressure when you're being watched by the camera and you can only do this one time. So I'm doing 8 rolls today and it worked out just fine. This is my favorite way to shape the rolls. I pull everything down around the sides to create tension on top, and then I have that little knot at the bottom that I'll close, and I just roll it around the countertop a bit to create some tension, and then, yes, you saw me flatten it. The rolls don't puff out, they only puff up, so it will only be the same size as it is around. So you do flatten it a bit to make it the correct size that you want for your sandwiches. So that's why I did that. I'm going to let them sit on the counter under that red towel until they're a little bit puffy and then put them in the oven. But we were recently outside, it was chilly, and so the kids requested hot chocolate when they came in, so I quick did the rolls and now I'm mixing up some hot chocolate for them. I used to get really frustrated when I would put the milk on the stove and just add the cocoa and the sweetener because the cocoa would take so long to incorporate into the milk, and I think it's because it was cold. So by adding the water first, warming that up, and combining the cocoa and sweetener with the water first, you get this nice, like basically chocolate syrup in the bottom of your pan. And then it's much easier to add the milk and warm everything up together. It's much more cohesive and it's a lot more enjoyable to drink. It's not as frustrating to just keep whisking and trying to get that cocoa to combine with the cold milk. So I add a little bit at a time, and this is how I make hot chocolate for the kids. It's really simple, couple ingredients on the stovetop, and it just takes long enough that they can get their coats and shoes off and warm up and then be ready for a mug of hot chocolate. This is a close-up look at it. You can see how well everything's combined and ready for their cute little mugs. But we also cannot forget to have some marshmallow on top. We make homemade marshmallow fluff and we enjoy adding it to our hot cocoa. I'm sure I'll show you at some point this winter how to make the fluff. It's delicious. My rolls are now nice and puffy and ready to go into the oven before supper. The venison is also done cooking in the slow cooker, so let's check it out. It is bubbly and hot. We still have some barbecue sauce on top, but I was pleasantly surprised at how many cooking juices were along the side. I shredded that and just kept it in the crock pot to stay warm until supper was ready. These are what the rolls look like when they come out of the oven, and I think they are just gorgeous. I'm going to slice one open so you can see the inside, see how soft it is. I will note these are best eaten the day that they are made, but they can be eaten later. They're just not quite as soft, but so squishy, so soft, and made from freshly milled flour. This is what our table spread looks like. We have carrots for a veggie, we have applesauce for some fruit, more barbecue sauce, some chips, some cheese, and everyone was able to make their sandwich and their plate the way they wanted it. Before I go to bed, I am prepping some breakfast. I am making a French toast casserole out of some of my freshly milled bread. I had this sitting in the fridge. I think it was to take to an event, but it didn't get eaten. So I put it in the fridge so it wouldn't get moldy, but it really does need eaten and it probably wouldn't taste great for sandwiches. So I'm turning it into this French toast casserole. One of my kids absolutely loves this meal. It's probably because there is a powdered sugar glaze on top, but either way, all my kids eat this and they really like it. And I know it's nutritious because it's made with my freshly milled flour bread and a couple other wholesome ingredients like milk and eggs. This recipe comes from a mindful mom on YouTube or her blog, and I'll link that down below. I am not really a morning person, so the idea of making fresh French toast in the morning is not appealing to me, but I am more than happy to prep this casserole the night before. It's much easier to make food when the kids are sleeping than when they're awake. I love my kids and including them and all that good stuff, but it does take a lot more effort. So I just cubed the bread that I had in the fridge. You can use whatever bread you want or have on hand. Sometimes I use like leftover dinner rolls after Thanksgiving to make this casserole. It's whatever you have. And then I mix the liquid for over top. So that's eggs, milk, seasonings, vanilla, that sort of thing. And then to make sure all of the pieces get baked correctly, they do need to be in contact with the milk mixture. So I just press it down, make sure all those pieces are saturated, and that'll make sure it bakes evenly in the morning. Once it's all saturated, it should look like this. I'll put a lid on it and stick it in the fridge overnight. Good morning. It is January 8th, and I am ready to stick my French toast casserole into the oven. It does need to be covered for the first part of the baking time. I use this silicone lid to cover it, but you could also just use some aluminum foil. Eventually you will take that off and let the top get brown and crispy, but you have to make sure the insides bake the whole way first. While that is in the oven, I'm going to prepare the powdered sugar glaze. It's just powdered sugar, milk, and you can add some salt and vanilla if you like. I think I skipped that this morning just because I didn't want to. But I'm always amazed at how powdered sugar condenses when you add just a little bit of liquid. So there are measurements on her blog. I just eyeball it. But if you're not quite sure, just always add less milk than you think. Here it is out of the oven and cut up in bowls for the kiddos. I have to cut it in small pieces because it's very hot, but they are very excited to eat it. I think they each ate about 3 bowls. I decided that tonight was another slow cooker meal. This one's called cream cheese chicken chili, and it is super simple and everything is still frozen, and that is totally okay. You put some chicken in the bottom and you add some corn. I think the recipe calls for a can of corn, but we freeze the corn, so that's what I put in. And a can of Rotel. I don't have Rotel, I just have plain tomatoes, and I have toddlers, so they don't really do spicy. Add some black beans, add some seasoning, put the lid on it, and call it a day. We had a play date this morning, so I just quickly threw everything in the slow cooker before we left for our play date, and it was super nice to know that it was already taken care of for that evening. The last ingredient to go on top is a block of cream cheese. I think I sat this out to help it not be so rock hard, but actually that would have been helpful because it just sticks to the paper otherwise. So if your cream cheese is still frozen, that's good too. Here's what it looks like in the crock pot. I'm going to stick the lid on and everything will fall apart as it thaws. But again, super easy. This is what I need in my life right now. We had quite a few snacks at our play date, so when we got home, I just, again, got everything out of the fridge that we could possibly eat for lunch, and everybody picked what he or she wanted. So this is the lineup for lunch. Not interesting, but that's what we ate. It's not supper time yet, but I do want to check on my cream cheese chicken chili and give it a stir. Oftentimes with crock pot meals, you're not supposed to take the lid off, but this one specifically, you do need to mix it around. And I wanted to make sure the chicken breasts weren't still frozen together. So I checked to make sure that they were all separated, mixed everything up just a little bit, and then I put the lid back on to keep cooking, keep it warm until supper was actually ready. I am serving freshly milled cornbread with our cream cheese chicken chili tonight, so the first step is to get that butter melted in the oven. I am milling my soft white wheat berries, and I'm also going to mill some dehydrated corn to make freshly milled cornmeal. I didn't even realize this was a thing until I found this recipe, and it works out so well. I don't think you're supposed to mill popcorn in your mill, but the dehydrated corn is okay. So I add that in, mill it all at the same time, and those are my flour ingredients for my freshly milled cornbread. As a side note, I tried to look up this recipe on the original blog as I'm filming this to make sure I get my quantities correct and such, and it is no longer up online. So it's a good thing I have it written down on a recipe card because the blog is no longer up. So this is just a PSA to you. If you have a favorite recipe on a blog, print it out or write it down because there's no guarantee it will be there tomorrow when you go to check. So basically, to make this recipe, you mix the dry ingredients and you add the wet ingredients and you mix it, just like any other cake ever. So you don't really need that much instruction. I will include the recipe and stuff down below if you want to make it. But here I am adding the butter. That is the last ingredient. And I wanted to show you how thin the batter is. This throws me off almost every time. Once I add the butter, it does seem a little bit thin, but it bakes up great. So you just pour it right into that hot cast iron skillet. There's still some butter in there to help season it and help prevent sticking, and then throw it back into the oven for, I don't know, like 20 minutes. You can also make this into cornbread muffins if you so choose, but it's just a great recipe all around. Our family really enjoys it. While that's baking, I am shredding the chicken. It is coming apart super easily because it's been cooking in these lovely sauces all day long, and it just smells awesome at my house. So I wish I could share that through the internet. I cannot, so I will just show you how delicious it looks and recommend that you also make it at your house too. Here is the cornbread out of the oven. I had the bowls of cream cheese chicken chili out already because, again, I have toddlers. They don't like things when they're hot. So these were cooling off on the countertop while I got the cornbread out, and now we are ready to sit down and eat it. It is January 9th, and this morning for breakfast we had leftover French toast casserole. For lunch, I just made some simple sandwiches and pulled stuff out of the fridge. So, ham and cheese on some leftover rolls. That night we had venison, we had some mandarin oranges, we have some chips, some more carrot sticks, and that was our simple lunch. You may have noticed these very ripe bananas on my countertop behind me while I have filmed myself cooking other things. Well, it is time to finally use them. I planned on making these muffins a couple of days ago and it just didn't happen, so they just kept getting riper and riper. As you can see, they're absolutely falling apart. But that also means they'll be nice and sweet and soft for this muffin recipe. The original recipe says to use 3 ripe bananas. I had 4 fairly small ones, so I just threw it in there and I'm gonna wing it. The first step is to mash the bananas until they're nice and smooth. I did not mash them very well. I still had lumps and therefore had banana lumps in my muffins. Thankfully, I don't mind very much. They're just for my family, and I was working very quickly because you cannot hear the screaming that was going on in the background, but believe me, there was plenty of screaming. Next, I add some honey. I like this recipe because there's no added sugar. It's sweetened by the bananas and the honey. Then an egg as a binder. Pretty standard. I'm using coconut oil in this recipe instead of butter to make them dairy free, and I added a little bit of vanilla. Those are all of my wet ingredients. The other reason I like this recipe is that I can make it all in one bowl. Again, fewer dishes, happier Rachel. I also wanted to experiment with making this gluten-free. So gluten-free, dairy-free, chocolate banana muffins is what I'm going for. So I added my Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 gluten-free baking flour to give that a try. Usually I make these with either a cup of all-purpose flour or a cup of soft white wheat flour. So you can pick your flour when you make these. Then I added some cocoa, some baking powder, some baking soda, and some salt. I think that's it. Oh, the recipe does call for chocolate chips, but I wanted to keep them gluten-free, dairy-free just to try them out, so I did not add any chocolate chips. Although I would have liked having chocolate chips in them. They do help with the sweetness. These are not sweet muffins, and they're not really supposed to be super sweet, but having some chocolate chips would have helped. So if you can have them, or if you can buy dairy-free chocolate chips, then that would be a good option. They are quite lumpy and bumpy. They are not pretty, but I got the bananas used and they were all eaten, so no problems there. The last thing I did before going to bed was feed my sourdough starter to prepare to make sourdough pancakes in the morning. The sourdough pancake recipe that I use is from Lisa at Farmhouse on Boone, and the bulk of it is just sourdough starter. So you need 2 cups of sourdough starter to make the recipe, so I need to feed my starter nice and big tonight. So I actually added soft white wheat tonight. I sometimes use hard white, sometimes hard red. It doesn't really matter, but that's kind of the consistency I'm looking for when I make my sourdough starter out of freshly milled flour. It does behave quite differently with freshly milled instead of all-purpose flour, so that's kind of what it looks like as I tuck it to bed tonight. The large bowl is for my sourdough pancakes, and the smaller container was just to keep my starter alive in the fridge. But this is how bubbly it looks in the morning, and we are ready to make some sourdough pancakes. If you'd like more in-depth instructions on how to make this recipe, I do have a video dedicated to it, and I will link that in the description. But I wanted to fill you in on why I didn't film anything on Friday night. Every Friday night, we get together with our small group from church. We share a meal and then discuss the sermon, just enjoy life together with our friends. So I didn't want filming to interrupt that at all, and I was pretty busy trying to get ready for company to come over. But I made some gluten-free spaghetti. I have gluten-free spaghetti in my basement for occasions like this because one of our other group members is gluten-free. I had some frozen gluten-free meatballs. I had some home-canned pasta sauce. I also had some green beans and home-canned applesauce to serve my friends. And one of the other moms made a cake for dessert because we were celebrating one of her kids' birthdays. It was really fun to be together. It was nice to not have to film that meal and just enjoy the company of our good friends. I want to encourage you. If you're not going to a church full of people who love Jesus and love learning about the Bible and want to encourage you in your walk with Jesus, keep searching. There are wonderful churches out there. We love ours and we are so encouraged each week. We are challenged and we are stretched, and we couldn't be more grateful for our church family. So if you're still looking, please keep looking. Don't give up. Find your people who will make you more like Christ, who will encourage you to read your Bible and to hold yourself to that high standard because it is worth it. I hope that you can see a small reflection of that in my videos as I strive to serve the Lord by serving my family. This is the last recipe that I will be sharing with you this week, but I will be back next week with a bunch of new recipes to share. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, to support my channel, and support my family in turn. If you are not already subscribed, please consider doing so and enjoy this very sweet message from my son on the way out.
What do you want to say?
Hello.
What's something you enjoyed eating this week?
I don't know.
You don't know. What about you, bud?
French toast casserole.
French toast casserole. Did you like puff pancake?
Yeah. Make it big.
Did you like Nana noodles?
Yeah. You're so yeah.
Wow. Did you like eggs and toast?
Yeah. No.
Did you like ham sandwiches?
No.
Anything else you want to say?
No. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Watch more of our videos.